My name is, oh, wait. I'm Italian, but my name is French because I was named after an old physician that delivered me, an old family friend. And he was a Frenchman. His name was Dr. Bear Paul. I was supposed to be a girl. I kind of blew it. So they named me after him, Dr. Bear Paul. And anyway, that's my French legacy, other than being taught by French nuns, which was, I still have the scars to attest to that. Mike, go on. Sorry.
No, all good, all good. Well, let's fire up the podcast. I want to get right into this. I did just want to thank everybody who was at Liberty's Horizon in San Diego last weekend. Bear connected me with that group, and they were nice enough to ask me to come out and talk. And that was an amazing symposium on moving into the private, which we'll probably touch upon today because it does relate a lot to our guests' topics that he likes to cover, because I think that is a massive solution for where we're going. But just thanks to everybody. What an amazing event. Michael and Shiloh and everybody who put it on, all the volunteers, the security guards were amazing, Bear. They're like everybody was resonating on this frequency that was really impressive. So thank you guys. And I learned a lot. And if you guys are still haven't caught that, you can actually go in and catch all the recordings and everything. Go to alphavedic.com/SoCal Freedom Event, I believe I'll put it in the show notes below. But you can, I'm sorry, it's alphavedic.com/Liberties Horizon. Liberties Horizon. That's with an I. Libertis Horizon. And we're planning on having a little workshop up at the farm, hopefully next month. We're still working out the dates, and that will be all about the same idea. Learning how to go into the private trust law.
So, Mike,
go ahead?
Can I interject real quick? Did you get my email this morning?
I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
Okay, so just so you know, in that email, I told you the exact dates. I told you who. I told you it's going to be kind of an exclusive invite to begin, and we're not publicizing that yet because we've got some. Not making it, excluding everybody, but anybody. But we have a guest list, and nobody heard what Mike just said. So go ahead.
Well, I haven't hit record yet, so.
It will be. We will video it, and it will be available to our preferred members on our site. So it's going to be a 2-day workshop, and very special. Very awesome. Private workshop, very power packed. So go ahead. Nobody heard that either.
I'm going to hit record now. I'm glad I didn't hit it yet. Here we go. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here, as always, with the illumined Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you from rainy Smith River today, getting some rain again this weekend. I'm excited. The river is looking extremely healthy. We are lucky enough to live on the cleanest river, arguably, in the North America. And we've been blessed to get water because we weren't getting water for most of winter. So it's been a rainy spring, and the river is looking very healthy. So much gratitude for that. And living in the great state of Jefferson, where freedom still reigns supreme, we are blessed. Today we have a wonderful guest, Etienne de la Boetie squared. I'm going to butcher it. Sorry, guys. I'm going to butcher it.
That was horrible. That was horrible, Mike.
And, but, we're going to be talking about a lot of very important topics and covering his book and everything he's been up to. What I love about Etienne is that, like many of the guests we have, and what Bear and I try to strive to do in our lives, is he is a Renaissance man. He has his hands in a lot of different things and is reaching people in really profound ways through his art and through his skills with not only his book, but what his background is. And he comes from technologies. He worked in one of the largest think tanks in the DC area, which I'd love to touch on a little bit, but left all that to really live the agorist, or what would call the voluntaryist life, right? Trying to educate people on the evils of government and really the pseudo-religion of government. And we're going to go deep into that today. And as a fan, as a crypto anarchist myself and a voluntarist, I really look forward to going into some of the philosophical sides of how we can govern civics, how society can rule itself, how living men and women can properly engage with each other that doesn't rely upon institutions, top-down statist, systems that are, of course, ruled by violence. Always. So this is a very exciting talk, Bear, and I know something close to your heart. Any notes before I introduce Etienne?
No, I just want to get into this, and we're all eager to hear from Etienne here, de la Boetie Square. So, and also I'd like to know maybe a little bit about your nom de plume, once we get started. So, it'd be kind of fun. So, Mike, take it away, and then we'll get started.
Fantastic. On this Alfacast, Etienne de la Boetie2 walks us through the Maya of government, gubernar to control, mint-mind versus voluntarism. In other words, government is mind control. If you're banking on the next election to change our present trajectory into further chaos, you'll definitely want to tune in to this very special episode of Alfacast. Organized crime researcher, educator, and professional speaker, Etienne is the author of Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed. He makes the case that government is illegitimate, was never intended to protect life, liberty, and property, but has always been used by intergenerational organized crime to rob and enslave, and they've been getting away with it through a partnership with the media to widely control perception. He is a voluntarist, author, father, technology entrepreneur, ex-Wall Streeter, cyclist, runner, hot yogi, multi-disciplinarian, truther, armchair economist, cryptocurrency enthusiast, and neo-abolitionist, along with, I guess, a rock climber as well, as we'll see in his background. In his book, he distills 20 plus years of research into short, easily digestible treatises on individual subjects and optimizes them for the 65% of society who are visual learners, while including references and links to more comprehensive research and evidence, including books, videos, documentaries, and audiobooks to accommodate the widest variety of learning preferences. He is the founder of a startup public policy organization, the Art of Liberty Foundation, that is exposing the illegitimacy and criminality of government, and the hidden curriculum of organized crimes, mandatory government schools, scouting programs, and police/military training, the pseudo-religion of statism, obedience, fealty, order following, and tax slavery. So much to cover. I want to jump right into it, Bear, but take it from here, Bear.
Etienne, I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a long time. So thanks for making time with us. This is going to be a real treat today. I guess, in hindsight, I realized I've always been a volunteerist, which I used to rationalize why I've always gotten in so much trouble my entire life and to present. So, I just came across that term, a few years back, always kind of considered myself sort of libertarian or whatever. But I like this new term better. I love your book here. Let me hold it up for the folks. Let's see. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, we see it.
What I love about this book is that it's good where normies can pick it up and learn a lot. I entered this whole arena a long time ago, like a lot of people, just being pissed off about taxes and started looking into it. And man, talk about a scam. And also, like a lot of people, I did a lot of research and found out that, wow, this is not only illegitimate, it's immoral and everything in the book. So I would try to data dump on a lot of people, give them brochures written by the Federal Reserve and, books, Creature from Jekyll Island and all sorts of scholarly articles. And then, realize that, hey, nobody's reading that stuff. They're just going to want to believe what they want to believe. But since I've had your book at home here, we have a lot of people that come here and visit the farm. It's on the coffee table all the time, and people just sort of naturally pick it up, and pictures and their reference with links and all sorts of good stuff, where if people want to know more, once they get the pictograph here and get a nice idea, they can go follow up and go as deep as they want. So it reaches so many more people than somebody like myself just trying to impart, information right off the start. So amazing job with this. And I hear you're in the midst of releasing the 5th edition. Is that correct?
I am. And so the copy that you were holding up is the 4th edition.
Mm-hmm.
And I released that in January of 2020. And so the 5th edition will bring the book into the age of the COVID. And really what I'm trying to do is expose how the COVID, because the COVID is essentially the second biggest scam in history, but it was a scam that was only made possible by government itself. The book will be retitled. It'll be entitled Government and the COVID, the two biggest scams in history. And the subtitle is How Intergenerational Organized Crime Runs the Government, the Media, and Academia. And when I say intergenerational
fantastic.
organized crime, I take that all the way back to monarchy. And monarchy was really the original organized crime. You're going to give us your money or we're going to hurt you. And when monarchy came out of favor, they developed democracy to trick the people into thinking that they have a say in how they get governed, but there's still a ruling class that sits above society that has the ability to use violence on peaceful people to extract taxes or to, control society or to make up rules for everybody. And government is always illegitimate because it's impossible to have a legitimate government. If I don't myself have the ability to make up rules for you and steal your money myself, then I can't delegate a right that I don't have myself to a representative to represent me doing something I don't have the ability to do myself. Nobody can be bound by a social contract that they didn't sign. And if Mike and I can't vote to rob Bear because there's 2 of us and 1 of him, well, it doesn't matter if there's 5 of us or 300 million of us. Nothing can take something that's inherently immoral and make it moral just because the mob wants to lynch black folks or rob Peter to pay Paul. And so government has essentially been the biggest scam in history, and they get away with it because they've been slipping it to the population as a religion. They don't call it a religion, but they've got all the little tools and tricks of a religion. And it's really this control of perception, program where they force you into a mandatory government school or an accredited private school that has to teach the same curriculum to keep their accreditation, where you're taught before you're old enough to really evaluate the logic and the morality that government is necessary, that government is desirable, and government is legitimate. And because they're slipping it to you when you're young, most people really never ever question the premise almost the rest of their lives. And then the other, part of the puzzle is that this organized crime system has been controlling perception through controlling the media, through monopolization, and through, on the old media side, 6 companies running hundreds and hundreds of subsidiaries to give everybody the illusion that there's all these different information sources in society, but everything just rolls back up to 6 companies, which is essentially 6 individuals. And then on the new media side, on the internet, search engine, video sharing, social media side of things, there's about 2 to 3 dozen, what I like to call kind of new media, internet companies. And those companies are controlling information algorithmically. And so this is the big, thing with Twitter. Everybody knows that Twitter has been censoring them as does, Google and YouTube and Reddit and Discuss that does comments on thousands of websites and Wikipedia and Snopes and Facebook, and I could go on.
All the fact checkers,
and so we're going to control perception by either controlling what the audience receives, or we're going to control perception by hiding algorithmically and suppressing the websites and people that are trying to expose the criminality and complete illegitimacy of the system. And so that's the basics of a nutshell. The final thing that I would do to introduce myself to your audience is just give a little background on volunteerism. And so
Great.
voluntarism is the idea that we don't need government, that everything the government does that is non-redistributive, you can't, rob Peter to pay Paul, but mostly what government does is a provider of services. And whether that service is armed protective services, which they call the police, or dispute resolution, or old age pensions, which they call Social Security, or, you just name whatever the thing the government is doing, from Amtrak to air traffic control, all of that would be done better, faster, cheaper by the free market, by mutual aid societies, by nonprofits, by real charity. So we don't need government. And if everybody got, right now, government is stealing over 50% of everyone's income in overt taxes, covert taxes, and inflation. And when I say, everybody knows overt is kind of like the 1040, but most people, they just simply do not, understand the amount of these little hidden taxes. Every time you pay your cell phone bill, every time you get a hotel room, every time you get a rental car, every time you get an airline ticket, every time you get you buy a beer, get a gallon of gas, I can go on and on and on. Those really, really add up. But all of that is nothing compared to the theft of inflation. And so the theft of inflation is that the government and the banks are stealing the value out of everybody's money, while the organized crime media, pretends that inflation happens because, fairies come at night and sprinkle pixie dust over gas pumps and price tags. And so, no, it's because that the banks, the money center banks, the Citigroups, the Wells Fargos, the Bank of Americas, the JP Morgan Chases, they've been given the ability to engage in something called fractional reserve banking, where when you go get a mortgage or you go get a car loan, they're not loaning you depositor money. They just kind of, tickle the keys of the keyboard, and then boom, they credit your account with digital dollars, even though that's inflationary, and even though that's stealing the value out of everybody else's money. So the more and more dollars that either these fractional reserve banks create or the Fed itself creates through something called quantitative easing or stimulus or bailouts, or whatever the excuse is for them to create money out of thin air and hand it to their friends on Wall Street, that process creates all of these excess dollars that begin bidding up the costs of the luxuries and necessities of life. And so that's why prices are rising, and it's a well understood monetary phenomenon that the media pretends like they just can't figure out what's going on.
Yeah, since I've been around for a few years, I go by what they call the Hershey Index. When I was a kid, you got a big, huge candy bar for a nickel, and now it's cut in size by about a quarter. And I don't know what the heck it costs these days, but probably well over $1 or something. But that's pretty much the way the whole world is. And when you have a little bit of a timeline, to see how much things have changed, to see how much prices have gone up, to see how quality has gone down, and what you get is just, minuscule compared to what you used to get. It's really an eye opener. This is the first time we've had a chance to talk, Etienne, and I don't know how much you know about us, but we talk a lot on our show about the fact that what we think of as government isn't even a government. It's a private corporation. That's another whole rabbit hole. But we go into that pretty thoroughly, and how that we're scammed in by contracts, to engage in that corporation. The other thing is we are kind of a health and wellness channel, since I spent over 40 years as a bioterrain physician. And at the beginning of this whole scam a couple years ago, I was and still am working with some really good doctors, was included in some documentaries and things where we blew the lid off of this whole cootie pandemic thing. And, we kind of talk in code just a little bit, because we're still using douche tube here. I have a powerful disdain for them, but we still get a few normies out of it. Our other platforms that we're also live streaming on right now, we're pretty much preaching to the choir. So we kind of play the game just a little bit on this other platform, in hopes of netting a few newbies into the, into the fold here. So yeah, we want to talk freely, but then we use code words and everything sometimes. But early on in my career, because it was in the middle of the or the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, like in 1980, whenever it was, I quickly connected the dots because I practiced functional medicine and discovered that there was no nexus between AIDS and HIV. They always have to have this kind of invisible boogeyman. And of course, that's what's going on again now. So glad to know that you're sort of ringing the bell on that as well. What I'd really like to get into today as well is, we believe strongly in natural law, medicine, government as we think about it, the financial world, media, if we all obeyed or ran congruent with natural law, things would work pretty good. And, we'd be doing a lot better. So, we know the media is brainwashing people. We know the educational system and everything. But some of us, for some reason, just came in wired a little bit differently and called BS on day one. And, I'd like to get your take as far as why some people are still going for this narrative, which is so farcical at this point. It would be almost impossible, I would think, to see through it. So maybe we can kind of get in the mindset of, why people are still falling for the same old tricks.
Well, number one, they don't know it's tricks. And so I, like yourself, saw through it immediately because I had read over almost 2 decades ago, Inventing the AIDS Virus by Dr. Peter Duesberg with a foreword by Carrie Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize for the invention of the PCR technique, who went on to say very famously that the PCR test should never be used to diagnose any kind of disease, and who died mysteriously right before the whole COVID scam started. But because I had read that book and understood the criminality and the scam of the CDC and Fauci and just like the scam of AIDS, I think that's one of the reasons why that I didn't fall for it essentially for a second and just realized immediately, like, here we go again. And one of the visualizations that I'm working on for the book is just comparing the scam of AIDS with the scam of COVID. We're going to, invent a little, a virus. We're going to say that the virus is causing conditions that are present because of something else. In the case of AIDS, it was, poppers, it was intravenous drug use, attributing some, immune disorders to hemophiliacs that already had immune disorders. There is going to be a fake test where X number of the population is going to be, categorized, as having this quote unquote virus by this fake test designed to give fake positives. We're going to drive you into the monopoly AMA hospitals where they're going to use drugs that are designed to make it worse. In the case of AIDS, it was AZT. In the case of, the cooties, it is remdesivir and ventilators. And then we're going to point to the damage done by the drugs that we give them and say, hey, this is an example of the pandemic, not an example of what happens when you get people on a ventilator or remdesivir or AZT. And so that scam, which I thank goodness that I, read that book, which, by the way, the book Inventing the AIDS Virus is selling on Amazon and eBay for about $350 a copy right now. And at one point it was up to almost $1,000. And so that, that knowledge really allowed me to kind of dodge the whole thing and then be on to them, be on to the co-conspirators almost immediately, once I realized what was going on.
Yeah. Wasn't Duesberg even on Rogan? Didn't he bring him on back in the day, Bear? Or was, I thought, and that was huge.
He was one of the researchers that I really relied on heavily when I was, early in my career and things just weren't adding up. So he helped explain a lot of things. I don't know if he's around anymore or not. Do you know?
I remember, I don't know if it was he or if it was him or the other cat I'm blanking on, but that was a big one where he basically came on Joe Rogan. This was like 8 years ago, where he said, yeah, no, AIDS is a hoax, and explained it all. And yeah, you're dead on, Etienne. And isn't it interesting? I don't know if you guys have seen this, but and this ties into the fourth estate, which doesn't really exist anymore, media or journalism, but media itself, the corporate media sphere, just rolled out the Magic Johnson documentary on Apple. And it's, Magic was the poster child to continue the AIDS sphere, where now they converted that narrative into the heterosexual side, right? Where now it's like, and I remember I was, I think, in 7th or 8th grade, and I was a huge Magic Johnson fan. And when that news dropped that he had AIDS and had to leave the NBA, all of a sudden, everyone I knew was in fear again. Like, I can get it. Oh my God. Oh my, and that actually kept me as a virgin most of my high school career. I think I'm saying a lot here, but everyone was scared. Everyone was deathly scared. So what did they do? We're now in 2.0 and everyone's waking up to the PCI scam. And so they have to now put out this really well-crafted, beautiful documentary about Magic Johnson. And of course, who's in it? Obama's in it. Fauci's in it, Clintons are in it, all these people are interviewed in it. And it's just so funny how Hollyweird is used to keep this magic spell going, right, of government. And it's all wrapped in together to maintain this false illusion of us needing government because there's the boogeyman out to get us.
The manufactured
and if Magic
boogeyman
was on the drugs. Yeah, if Magic was on the drugs all these years, he would not be looking as well as he does now.
Oh,
and that's a fact.
That was the other thing I was going to mention. Thanks for bringing that up. They kind of touch on that, how it's a miracle that he's alive, but they barely do. They have a clip from Fauci saying, yeah, he's got the new drugs, and stuff like that.
Oh, yes.
And then they never cover it again. And magically, he's all good, right? So yeah, fascinating times. And Etienne, to your point, yes, the fake boogeyman.
The manufactured enemy, whether the invisible enemy is terrorists, whether the invisible enemy is the climate, whether the invisible enemy is the cooties. Government is going to compact you into a state of fear where they're going to present themselves as the only solution. And they're going to control all the information, or they're going to attempt to control all the information that you receive about any given topic using this monopolization of the media, this algorithmic censorship on the what I like to call the DARPA internet. For those in your audience that don't know, the internet was a military network that the military had access to for decades before it was released to the population. So by the time they released it, they had already figured out, they've got futurists and cultural anthropologists and technologists, and they'd already figured out where they needed to place their bets on, what technologies and what platforms and what companies that they needed to control to be able to widely and algorithmically censor information on their own network. And so that's really the name of the game, is control of perception. I call it the most powerful weapon in the U.S. arsenal, the ability to control perception. If they can make you believe that you're not a free human being that just lives on this planet, that you're, by virtue of where you were born on this side or that side of an imaginary line, that you're a American or a Canadian or Israeli or a Russian or Chinese, and by virtue of where you're born, you now owe half your income in overt taxes, covert taxes, and inflation to this organized crime system. If they can really make you believe that, they can really make you believe that there's a tiny invisible virus there and everybody's got to wear masks. I mean, that is just, think of the power of that capability. Think how much money is being extracted. Think how much damage is being done by that. And so luckily, the word is finally getting out. People are not only realizing the illegitimacy of government, but they're especially realizing just the complete criminality, the boss hog level corruption in Washington, D.C. The pentagram is missing trillions and trillions of dollars. The post office has allegedly lost 87 billion dollars in the past 15 years alone. Amtrak claims they lost almost $1 billion on food and beverage alone in a decade. So the train goes out with $500 worth of food that they sell for like $3,000-$4,000 when you take a look at the markup on an Amtrak train, and then it comes back with no food or no money, and they can't figure out where the money went. Come on, it's anybody. I used to, when I worked on Wall Street, I would take, Amtrak, back and forth between Northern Virginia and New York. And the hamburger that you would get you could get if you would eat that crap in 7-Eleven for $1, they're selling for $8.50. They're selling a beer that they could, probably spend 75 cents on for $7. And they can't, they lost $1 billion on food and beverage. I mean, it's a wholesale theft. I mean, we're just being robbed left and right. And it's those crazy profits that give them the ability to monopolize the media. It's it might as well be free as somebody that, like on Wall Street, we used to call it mice nuts. Like the cost of controlling the media versus the trillions that they're stealing, it literally might as well be free. But most people, they just can't comprehend, that the entire media could have been bought up and monopolized, because there's so many different, magazines and newspapers and radio stations. And it isn't until you actually show them a media ownership chart of how all of these ostensibly independent companies roll up to this small, tiny handful of 6 companies that the light bulb goes on and go, oh, I did not understand that was going on. And so that's one of the things I do in the book is I use visualization to make what was invisible now visible to the public. And so that is really the magic that Bear was talking about. Once you pick it up and you see the visualizations, it clicks because you see it with your own eyes, and it brings you into a deeper understanding of how the system works. Another example that I like to give is, if you take a look at all, CNN and Fox and CNBC and MSNBC and all these different ostensibly independent companies, but don't understand that all of the anchors, the publishers in dozens and dozens of media outlets, they all roll up to essentially 4 organizations: the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, where they have maneuvered their members into these key editorships, reporterships, publisherships, where they're able to have secure meetings and secure facilities on a regular basis around the world to be able to get everybody on the same page with whatever the scam of the day is. Unless you realize that all of these reporters and editors are connected together in 4 organizations that Jeffrey Epstein was a member of and ought to be the poster boy for, you just don't understand how the game is played until you see it with your own eyes. And then again, we've made something that was invisible now visible through visualization, and people are just like, boom, I didn't understand that was going on. Now I do. And then once you realize how the magician does the trick, you don't get fooled by the trick anymore.
Yeah, and it is an amazing book. I've watched a lot of people pick it up. I don't even say anything, and they just naturally just start going through it page by page. You don't do that with a regular book, but it's like a magazine. They want to look at the pictures, then they read the caption, and they're just kind of drawn into it. So it's a brilliant work. Great idea.
Man, I was just gonna say, Bear, I could have used this book about 15 years ago or 20 years ago, my roommates, as I was telling them all this, and there were that exact debate, well, there's no way, like, a lot of these newspapers are independently owned, and there's no way there's this like sort of monstrous, conspiracy. And I was like, no, guys, it's very much easy if you can see the pyramid, right? But I didn't have that book, that tool to just show them. And now we have it. And it's also become painfully honest obvious how.
I wanted to make a quick comment about the federal income tax. We've been on that for a long time, and that really is their Achilles heel, because if everybody just said screw that every April 15th, it would be game over. Mm-hmm. So a long time ago, before we paid taxes online and all that sort of thing, you wrote out a check and mailed it in to the nearest processing center. And we started examining our checks when they came back. And it was always signed Secretary of the Treasury. Now, with a little bit of sleuthing, we found out that was not the Secretary of the Treasury of what we think of as our government. It was actually the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. And this was the beginning of our journey. Now, this is true. Mm-hmm. And there was a trust that we uncovered, pure trust number 51, domiciled in Puerto Rico, which was foreign owned. That's where every single check that you make to the IRS, at least back then, went. It went right out of the country. And from there, it was channeled into, through eventually to the city of London and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I always get tickled when I hear people still, repeating the mantra, pay your fair share, because one thing we have proven beyond any shadow of a doubt when it comes to federal income tax is not one red cent goes to maintaining the infrastructure or anything to do domestically with what we think of as our country. It's just, it's beyond theft. And then people say, well, what about the roads and, and all the infrastructure? Well, first of all, we know they're doing a shitty job because everything's, third world country level right now. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, those are all consumption taxes. And most of those consumption taxes even, are grifted off by, the different local bureaucrats and all that. And then they got two sets of books that we call the confidential annual, financial reports that exist in every municipality. So yeah, it's just such a huge scam. And the only reason why we think we have to pay it is with contracts. And this is all stuff, we're just so where we're coming from, because we have been sold at the third phase of bankruptcy in the, 20s, 30s as sureties for the, the third phase of bankruptcy. This started after the Revolutionary War, which is first phase. So it's just so amazing. Now, it's gratifying that a lot of people are starting to catch on, but a lot of the normies out there, it's like, guys, we're waiting for you. It's not, I don't have a problem with the predators that, want to kill everybody and want to rob everybody and cause all this suffering, all the pedophilia. Okay, they're just twisted, tormented souls themselves. I get it. But the normies are the ones that are going along with it. They're the problem. So they're the ones that we're trying to reach here. And I'm not trying to be mean or, anything to that class of people, but we really need to wake up a whole bunch of people quickly because, there's an agenda underfoot right now. And there's a little bit of a sense of urgency right now. We've got Scary Poppins with the Ministry of Truth. They're just like right in the open, full on here. It's just incredible. So one last thing I'll say, what we're doing here is we're creating our little slice of decentralization, with agriculture, providing for your own food, your own medicine. And we have a little prototype here. That's what we've created here at Alpha Vedic. And our whole idea is to share this and make it reproducible so other people can build many of these themselves in their communities. And that's really the only way I see out of this is just becoming less dependent. So let me know on your end what you see as far as the solution and, maybe in your travel, some of the positive things that you're seeing going on.
Well, before we do that, I just want to echo what you just said and tell a story that I don't think I've ever told, told before. But I realized that the government and the tax system was a scam in my early 20s. And my first job out of college, I was introduced to the work of Irwin Schiff by a woman named Vernice Kuglin, who was a friend of mine in Memphis, Tennessee. And I met Irwin Schiff, and I read his books exposing the fraud of the income tax system, and realized that there was no law that actually requires you to pay taxes, and that they're just using tricky language to make it seem like you're liable, because it just says if you are liable, and then they don't actually define, who is liable. And so I went through everything, in his essentially, workshop to be able to go to my employer and say, I want you to quit withholding taxes from me, which they did, but they spent $40,000 in 1993 dollars. Okay. Well, I don't know what the equivalent of that would be, but it's got to be over like 100K researching this. And the law firm, and I only know this because I worked for my best friend's dad at the time, and his mom told me the backstory, but like the law firm came back to them and said, you're not going to believe this. We thought this kid was crazy, but he's actually right. There is no law that requires you to pay income taxes. And so, so that was number one. Number two, my friend Vernice Kuglin was a captain at Federal Express. And at one time, they had not withheld over $250,000 in taxes from her salary over X number of years. So the IRS took her to court. And if you search engine her name, Vernie Kuglin, Kuglin, number one thing is a New York Times article on how she beat the IRS in court. She actually won in court against the IRS because there's no law that says that, you're required to pay income taxes. And so that's a very, personal story that I just kind of wanted to share just to back up what you were saying. And I thought your audience might find it of some interest. But my understanding is there's about 60 to 70 million people that are not paying taxes in the United States. To your point about, half of the country is onto this and half of the country isn't. So you've got half of the country that has figured out that the government and the media are lying to them. They may not have all of the facts. They may not understand it to the degree that we understand it, being scholars of it for 20 plus years, but they just intrinsically understand that the government and the media is lying to them. They're turning off television. They're turning off CNN in droves. They're not even turning on CNN Plus, complete failures. And so the propaganda system is to some degree, falling apart, but you've got half the country that has figured out that the government and the media are lying, and you've got half the country that hasn't, and you can tell who is who by who's wearing a mask.
I know, right?
That's great.
Isn't that amazing? Can I say one recommendation to our audience too with Irwin Schiff? I highly recommend the Aaron Russo's movie, America from Freedom to Fascism, yes, where they feature him. That I remember watching that when that came out in 2006. And Bear and I, that's how long we've been talking about. Bear and I were talking about it. And I was trying to actually connect with Aaron. Remember Bear? And unfortunately, shortly after that movie came out, he quickly came down with, I believe, cancer and died, after that famous Alex Jones interview. But Irwin's heavily featured, I believe, in that film. And that, if you have a normie that still doesn't believe this, send him that film, you guys, because that film will blow your socks off. It was so well done. So I just wanted to say that. And
in that same film, the present IRS commissioner back then stated on camera that we have a great tax system, the best voluntary compliance tax system, because we scare the hell out of people. And that's where we're at. And it just one last thing, it might interest people that nobody ever goes to jail for not paying taxes. They go to jail for breach of contract.
For lying on the form. Exactly. Because they lie. That's the reason they go to jail. They lie on the form. They misrepresent their income, and then they sign under penalty of perjury that they're, that this is how much income they made. And then they go to jail because they have contracted with the government voluntarily and now incriminating themselves.
It makes you wonder if Wesley Snipes was set up for that, because supposedly he had the big case and wasn't he supposed to go to jail or something?
No, they set up somebody every year. So
yeah.
You just watch every year, kind of like March, they'll burn somebody famous, literally.
I know a little backstory on that one. There was some anti-tax gurus who were actually controlled opposition government operatives, and they were out teaching seminars back then, and I was very much aware of them. They got a hold of Wesley Snipes and really got him convinced, of a lot of truth, but then they also deliberately led him down the wrong path so that he was a sitting duck. And that's what happened. And that's what they do. They have a lot of agents out there that tell you some truth, but then, give you just enough to get you in hot water. And then somebody of a high profile goes down and it scares everybody else off from trying to anything, similar.
So complete criminality. I wanted to kind of shift topics, and I'd like to just kind of take y'all through my executive summary of the scam of the cooties. And so I'm going to use the code word since we're on CIA, YouTube. But essentially the cooties has been a scam. It's quite possibly the second biggest scam in history after the scam of government itself, which is the scam that made the scam of the cooties possible through the hierarchical control of health information through the regulatory capture of the World Health Organization, the National Institute of Health, the CDC, the American Medical Association, NIAID, on the academia side, and the ability to control perception using the monopolized media system. And so the cooties was a multi-trillion-dollar robbery and eugenics program engineered by the same intergenerational organized crime system of fractional reserve banks and government media puppets that we outlined in the previous 4 editions of Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed. The short version is that intergenerational organized crime spent billions to steal trillions. The cooties was the engineered, manufactured reason for trillions of dollars in quote unquote bailouts, stimulus. And we believe the manufactured and engineered reason for the Federal Reserve to prop up the crooked Ponzi scheme U.S. Treasury market, which they did to the tune of $80 billion a day at one point in 2020 under emergency cootie powers. The cooties allowed the organized crime participants to engage in disaster capitalism by profiting from their foreknowledge to buy, short sale, and hedge specific stocks and investments. They were able to wage economic warfare against free market businesses with forced closures and chain stores and chain restaurants, so the population doesn't have independent wealth and resources to resist the economic and medical martial law tactics being waged against them. It's to force the population to accept harmful injections, vaccine passports, and other biosecurity state measures, and what appears to be a negative eugenics program to cull the elderly and extend the organized crime government's other Ponzi scheme, Social Security. And how did the magicians pull off the trick? Regulatory capture of government health experts in multiple countries, especially US, China, and Italy, and the CDC, NIAID, and World Health Organization that declared a public health emergency of international concern with a small handful of respiratory illnesses in a country of over 1 billion people. It was media fakery on a small handful of hospitals, notably Elmhurst in Queens, New York, where the criminals engineered apparent pandemic conditions and medical simulations for news cameras, where televised crowds waiting to get into the hospital were gone the next day. They used a faulty test, the PCR, designed to give false positives, even though the Nobel Prize winning inventor said publicly it should never be used to diagnose a disease. They passed over $100 billion in incentive payments through the CARES Act to doctors and hospitals to classify patients as cooties, and then paid them bonuses for using treatments guaranteed to produce death and disease, notably ventilators and remdesivir. And they coordinated the response of 1,000+ corporations, government officials, NGOs, and nonprofits through the World Economic Forum. And those 1,000+ corporations, government officials, NGOs, and nonprofits, that is the companies that they have been able to buy up and monopolize through the money stolen through fractional reserve banking. And I'm going to give one example just to understand the power of fractional reserve banking. Let's say I have $1 and you have $1, and we have the only $2 in the world. Okay, so I own 50% of the world's wealth, and you, dear listener, you own 50% of the world's wealth. If a bank or a central bank comes along and creates $2 more out of thin air using either fractional reserve banking or quantitative easing, all of a sudden now the bank owns 50% of the world's wealth, and now you and I have been reduced to 25% of the world's wealth. And that is essentially how the scam is being worked. They're buying up the world with their little paper tickets, and the companies and the organizations and the quote unquote nonprofits and foundations, they are being coordinated through the World Economic Forum that is giving them secure meeting facilities, regular meetings. They're penetrating the cabinets of governments with their young global leaders. And that is essentially the executive summary of the executive summary. The final analogy is, imagine we're all playing Monopoly and the banker is cheating and he's pulling $500 bills out of the bank. At the end of the game, who owns everything on the board and who are renters and debtors? And that's what we're up against in a nutshell.
Yeah, and one little addendum to that is, of course, money is created by concurrent creation of a debt. So there is no money in existence. So when we go in and get that alleged loan, then they print that amount of money to cover the alleged loan that they never loan. And furthermore, they only print enough money to cover the principal and not the interest. And that's, how it goes on the public side. Of course, on their side, they print as much as they want and, to buy up everything. But whenever the music stops, that means the less industrious, resourceful people will not be able to pay back the full loan, which is manufactured homelessness and part of the massive genocide program that we're now witnessing as those people more and more every day hit the streets, get drugged, and on and on. So that's what we're seeing. That's why homelessness.
And can I say one more thing too? What's mind-boggling about this, Etienne, is that the crown cooties has definitely shown us that global government is here. Because I still get baffled when I watch like random videos on YouTube of a track meet or something in South America and everyone's got masks on. Like it's not like it's just the US or the NATO countries. This is global. So it's one thing, it's really illustrated to us. It's here. That was going to be my next question. Is global government here? Is the one world order here?
It's being implemented currently, and there's aspects of it that are 100% globally governed through the World Health Organization, which, if you think about it, and again, it's what I call the control of government, media, and academia, is the ability for the World Health Organization to reach down hierarchically through multiple governments on the federal level, okay, in multiple countries, and then have those policies pushed down to through the state health departments, the local health departments, the county health departments in town and cities. It's that hierarchical control of medical information globally that has been able to produce the quote unquote, pandemic that we experienced, even though it wasn't a pandemic, even though the hospitals were empty, even though it wasn't going on in countries that weren't participating. I saw a funny meme the other day that had an Amish guy going, COVID, no, we don't have television.
Yeah.
Exactly. What we are going to see, though, and what we're already seeing, is the folks that did succumb to the roll up your sleever, are really starting to feel the repercussions of that. So obviously, they'll turn that into an excuse to state there's another pandemic underway. But after practicing for so many years, I was able to again draw that connection between things I was seeing symptomatically in people, and then link them to roll up your sleevers back in the day, for, just the typical ones that, everybody gets. And then we were able to do the analytics and see how certain roll up your sleevers created certain conditions and had certain incubation periods. And when you saw that population that got that, right at the end of the incubation period, you had a huge spike in that particular malady. And now we're already seeing the carnage come in with this last batch of roll up your sleevers. And it's going to be so off the charts. I really believe there's going to be, well in excess of 1 billion to 2 billion people that are going to be succumbing to this very soon. So that's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out, especially when people start connecting the dots and start acting out. Who knows, it might even work in our favor and be a unifying factor where, it's a harsh wake-up call, but when people realize they've been deceived on that level, it might actually bring a bunch of us together that normally wouldn't have.
So that's an excellent segue into eugenics. And Mike, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, let me give you the opportunity to do that. Okay, go ahead.
So, so for your audience that are not familiar with eugenics, eugenics is a kind of pseudoscience that it's the belief that one or a group of people can improve humanity by selective breeding to develop positive traits like intelligence. So, wanting your intelligent son to marry an intelligent woman so that you have intelligent kids, that's called positive eugenics. But there's another darker aspect to eugenics called negative eugenics that focuses on eliminating either undesirable traits through marriage restrictions, segregation, sexual sterilization. In its most extreme form, euthanasia, or even murdering and killing those that eugenicists consider undesirable. In an attempt to decrease the procreation among the unfit, eugenicists in the early 20th century passed laws prohibiting marriage to people with diseases or other conditions believed to be hereditary. And they also banned misgeneration, a negative view of marriage between people of different races. And this picture that I'm showing, so this eugenics was very, it's hard to explain how popular this was in the early 20th century, but essentially through funding by primarily the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller family, the Carnegie family, and other very, very wealthy industrialists and monopolists of the day. The government in the early 20th century was actually sterilizing women because they were quote unquote feeble-minded, or they were sterilizing convicts. They were, there is and it's a very small percentage of the population that believes in this, craziness. And by the way, the fact that they want to eliminate a significant portion of the population is very convenient if the population is having an awakening to who has robbed the bank and is starting to point at the bankers and the political puppets and the media and going, they're all in on it together. This is how they do it. And so the science and religion that allows them to convince people that we've got to get rid of lots and lots and lots of the inhabitants on the earth benefits them as a criminal organization, because you're getting, gives you the ability to get rid of your critics. But that eugenics is, is well known, well documented in history. And it went underground in the 1930s once the eugenics policies of the Nazis became widely known. The experimentation on twins, the experimentation on human beings, the getting rid of Jews and other undesirable elements, things like that. That became that. So the horror of that drove it underground, but it never went away. It just got renamed bioethics. And the American Eugenics Society spun off Planned Parenthood. Okay. And Planned Parenthood is the kind of somewhat, among some people, socially acceptable, voluntary eugenics. We're going to make free abortions available so that we can get rid of these undesirables in society by killing them. And so Planned Parenthood is essentially the most visible part of what has been an ongoing program to cull who these believe to be, undesirables. Margaret Sanger, one of the founders of Planned Parenthood, famously said that we needed to get rid of undesirable like weeds, and that she wrote in a letter to a friend how that they were, that they didn't want anybody to know that they were out to exterminate the Negro. So that's a very famous quote. And so the picture that I'm sharing right now is a picture that was taken in 2001. And in 2001, our boy, little Anthony Fauci, is sitting right there with 6 billionaires who are the primary funders of eugenics in the United States today. And so I'm just going to take you through some of the people that we've got Anthony Fauci pictured in the same room with. Number one, Andrew Carnegie, and the event that this picture was taken at was the Andrew Carnegie Medals of Philanthropy Award ceremony in New York City on December 10th, 2001. And so right off the bat, Andrew Carnegie and the Carnegie Foundation, with Skull and Bones member Daniel Coit Gilman as president, financed the establishment of biological experiment station related to eugenics at Cold Springs Harbor, New York. And in 1910, the Eugenics Records Office was begun there, later receiving funding from the Rockefeller Foundation after John D. Rockefeller Jr. formed the Bureau of Social Hygiene. And so the organization that has brought these people together is literally, probably one of the two main founders. So it was Carnegie and Rockefeller. And so David Rockefeller is also in the picture, and his family funded the Wilhelm Kaiser Institute in Germany, which was the basis for the Nazi eugenics and racial hygiene policies of the Nazi government. He funded the Eugenics Records Office at Cold Springs Harbor that exists today. And he has been one of the major funders of Planned Parenthood in the United States. And interestingly, in 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation published a document called Scenarios for Future Technology and International Development that outlined a future scenario that they called lockstep, where the world would be locked down because of an influenza virus that jumped from animals to humans in China, requiring masks, temperature checks, and biometric IDs. And so he's in the picture, as is Bill Gates Sr. We got Bill Gates Sr. right here. This is the father of Bill Gates, who is essentially the number one behind the cooties today. And a lot of people don't realize, but Bill Gates Sr. was a board of director member of Planned Parenthood, which was birthed out of the American Eugenics Society. Oh, here it is. Here's the exact quote from Margaret Sanger. She wrote to a friend, "We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population." Also, who else we got in the picture? Oh, look, we got Ted Turner, who Ted Turner is quoted in 1996 saying a total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. And he is also widely believed to be behind the Georgia Guidestones, which is a Stonehenge-like monument with eugenicist principles translated in 8 languages in a field in Georgia. And Turner is also an organized crime propagandist behind CNN and the deceptions and distractions of cable television. Who else we got? Oh, look, we got George Soros. George Soros is there with Fauci, and George Soros is a major investor in Monsanto, and he's been linked to a government hospital in Sierra Leone that had a U.S. biosecurity level 2 bioweapons research lab that was also linked to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they were experimenting on Ebola. Okay, and we've got Irene Diamond, the chair of the Aaron Diamond AIDS Research Center, which is officially affiliated with Rockefeller University and happens to run its own level 3 biosafety facility. And those are just the ones in the picture. Now, they're not the only, because this picture was taken 20 years ago. Let's take a look at the modern participants and let's see if any of them have any, connections to eugenics. And what do we find? We find, well, obviously Bill and Melinda Gates, the former chairman of Microsoft and the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, are the world's top funders of eugenics, with major gifts to Planned Parenthood and Cold Springs Harbor and other major eugenics operations, the World Population Council that exists today. Also, there was a gentleman by the name of Bill Ackman, and Bill Ackman is a billionaire hedge fund manager, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group, and really one of the first voices on Wall Street to publicly go on television, okay, and very vocally call for a shutdown of the American economy, where he was pre-positioned to profit from shutting down mom and pop restaurants, coffee shops, and hotels, with investments in a company called Restaurant Brands International, which runs 26,000 Popeyes, Burger Kings, and Tim Hortons. He had investments in Starbucks and Hilton hotels. So he's essentially going on television advocating that mom and pop restaurants, hotel chains, and coffee shops be shut down, while he is personally invested in the chain stores, the chain hotels, the chain, restaurants that are financed to be able to weather the storm after their competition is put out of business by the policy that he's going on television and advocating. And also, he very famously apparently had foreknowledge of the COVID-induced 2020 stock market crash, because he hedged his hedge fund Pershing Square's portfolio. He essentially he bet 27 million buying credit protection, generating $2.6 billion in profit. So when the stock market crashed, he was hedged to make $2.6 billion, almost as if he knew it was going to happen. And he is also a major donor to eugenics with major donations, $10 million.
That's a good month.
$10 million to Cold Springs Harbor, millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood. And then we've got a woman named Dr. Leanna Wen. And Dr. Leanna Wen is a former president of Planned Parenthood. She's a Rhodes Scholar. She's a member on the Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum. And she is being used by the mainstream media as an authoritative pro-vaccination voice that is out there smearing anti-vaxxers. And so she is on, she was one of the, so if you're controlling perception, you've got to have crisis actors and you've got to have the mockingbird media that are out there, talking your talking points. And so this is one of the quote unquote doctors that have been featured prominently on a gazillion, television shows and podcasts and things like that, talking that the cooties is a real thing and the need for everybody to roll up your sleeve and be injected with this obvious bioweapon. And so these are just a few of the people that are behind the cooties, that are pushing the cooties, that are pushing this vaccine, quote unquote vaccine. And so there's an amazing, amazing overlap between the eugenics movement and the people that are profiting from the cooties and the people that are involved in the media campaign to convince the population that there is something called cooties and that they need to go get this shot, which has been linked through the VAERS database in the United States to 27,000 plus deaths in the United States, and through the UDRA vigilance database in the European Union, which covers 22 countries, the European Union, where it has been linked to over 46,000 deaths. Both of these systems are passive systems. There was a major study that was done by Harvard Medical School called the Harvard Pilgrim Study, where they found that the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Effect Reporting System, only really captured about 1% of actual deaths and adverse events. So when VAERS says that they have 27,000 deaths, from the COVID, quote, the cooties, quote unquote, vaccines, you can multiply that number by 100 and you get 2.7 million deaths. Now, these deaths in the overwhelming majority of cases are elderly, and it's being attributed not to the shot, it's being attributed to something different. So they're not being recorded in VAERS. Now, why aren't they being recorded in VAERS? There's a lot of different reasons, but one of the main reasons, or a couple of the main reasons, are, number one, everybody is being told that the vaccines are safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. So when somebody does have an adverse effect, they don't necessarily tie that mentally to the injection that they may have got 3 days ago, a week ago, or a month ago. But also, the doctor has no incentive whatsoever to, self-report on himself or to take responsibility for the death or the disease that he just caused by recommending or participating in this injection campaign. And then finally, when the Harvard Pilgrim study was done, that study was done using the childhood immunization program, where the majority of people actually had an ongoing relationship with their doctor. So if something, happened to their kid, they go right back into the doctor's office, and then the doctor is like, oh, okay, it looks like we had one of these very quote unquote rare things, and they report it to VAERS. But that's not what's going on with this injection campaign. These injections are being given by CVS's and Walgreens and pop-up, injection sites and drive-up injection sites where there is no ongoing relationship with the healthcare provider to be able to go back and to enter that information into VAERS. And so back then it was, they were only capturing, 1 in 100 deaths or adverse events. I actually think it's probably more, because there's no ongoing relationship with the healthcare provider that gave you the injection in the first place. And so we're talking about, even if you believe the official number of 27,000 deaths That's an enormous death toll. That, to put it into perspective, when they had the swine flu vaccination campaign, which was also a scam, which was also diverting money to big pharma, drug companies, etc., they stopped that program with less than 50 deaths. And so when 50 deaths occurred, they're like, whoa, 50 deaths. We're at 27,000 acknowledged. That is most likely 2.7 million. We're talking about a whole-scale genocide. If this is not a eugenics program, I don't know what else you could call it.
Yeah, and those numbers are actually very conservative, and it's not at all acknowledging the plausible deniability that they'll have, when people months after getting these things are getting sick. They aren't even acknowledging that it's kind of strange for grade schoolers to be getting heart attacks, for athletes in the prime of life, to be having all these strokes and heart attacks. And in my career, I saw a good number of damaged kids from these things. And this was, of course, the pre-Cootie era where we thought that, well, I never believed it, but a lot of people just thought these things actually prevent disease. Not one of them in history was ever meant, nor did it prevent disease. But when they would come to me with their kid that was obviously damaged for life, just hours or days after getting one of these things, even though they had their primary healthcare provider and they didn't get it at Rexall back in those days, the primary healthcare provider would still deny it and say there would be no possible connection. So, don't look for the regular doctors to do the right thing and admit there might be a nexus either.
Myocarditis, the new normal.
Yes, yeah. And now you're seeing it being an attempt to make myocarditis be normalized with television commercials and news stories and things like that. And so this is exactly the control perception program that I'm talking about, where if you're able to control the information that people receive through this monopolized media or the algorithmic censorship of the internet, human beings are essentially supercomputers, and like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. And so if you're controlling the information that the human mind receives, then you're able to a certain degree to get that person to believe a certain worldview or a certain outcome if they don't understand how the big game is played.
Yeah, look at this. This
and
is
besides.
Can I show this
ahead,
real
Mike.
quick? Do you guys see this?
Yeah.
Eugenics. This is Eugenics 101. This is the basically the projection. So of deaths per 1,000 people. See how it was going down since 1950, and this is in the U.S. So for those listening, we're looking at a chart on macrotrends.net where it's showing deaths per 1,000 people. And we've had this trend going down, of course, which you think would be, due to, better modern, systems set around for cleanliness and, just what we talk about in terms of health. But then when we hit right around now, well, let's see, this was in 2012, 2014, it starts going up. And now they project this as just skyrocketing up for the next 20, 25, 50 years as their eugenics program gets initiated. So that I just was looking this up and thought that was really interesting that the UN projections show way above 1950s levels of deaths per 1,000 people as it's trending up, 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 up.
And so I think we're in the middle of the eugenics operation.
Yeah. And it's not just the roll up your sleevers, it's the other things that work in conjunction with them. For instance, the microwaves, I've seen more than enough evidence to see that they interact, the microwaves that we're all exposed to now interact with what's in people's bloodstream to hasten, the results of, all the bad side effects. Also, of course, with their spraying in the air, and you put all that together, and when you know a little bit of chemistry and understand what they're doing, they're all part of a larger cocktail. And when it finds its way to your bloodstream, of course, the people that get the roll up your sleeve are at much, much greater risk because they're, on the fast track. But even for the rest of us, the things that we're breathing and then getting exposed to, especially with the microwave, the shortwave technology. It's all, I mean, it's a brilliant plan if you want to kill a lot of people and then also have people ask for the very thing that's killing them. And I think somebody from the Communist Party back in the 50s and 60s told us that that's what they would be doing.
By the way, so communism is government 2.0, and so one of the things that I find interesting is that communism was funded by Wall Street. So there's a great book by Anthony Sutton called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, where he breaks down Wall Street's funding of communism. And so why would Wall Street, quote unquote, capitalist fund communism? Well, it doesn't make sense unless you look at it through the lens of what I call organized crime theory, which is that government has always been illegitimate. You can never have a legitimate government. It's always been used to rob and control populations. And so if you're using, kind of government, 1.5 in the United States to rob and control the population, but it's problematic. We supposedly got a Bill of Rights. We supposedly have the ability, we got the ability to be armed. The population, believes that they're free, et cetera. Well, that's not in the interests of the organized crime system. And so I think the organized crime system developed government 2.0, where we've got this other version of government where you don't have any private property and you don't have any gun ownership and you don't have any Bill of Rights and you don't have anything like that. And so they're trying to shift the population globally into government 2.0 so that they can be robbed and mulcted without, the pretense of having any rights or without, the pretense of having guns. And so that's essentially, the lens that makes sense of everything that is going on today.
And we're being told that we will like it.
And own nothing.
And you like it.
So obviously, I think this is a good time to move into solutions because you have them, Etienne, and I want to touch on what's going on in, is it New Hampshire, right? And this amazing movement that's happening in there. And of course, here in Alpha Vedic, as Bear already described, is we're building parallel systems as a solution, right? And it's a lot of it's focused on decentralization. It's focused on this like sort of agorist mentality of working in your community and getting away from the entire scam of corporate government. Interested to hear your take on solutions and what you're involved with, because I think people are extremely hungry for it. We've really shown the problem well here. We've illustrated it well. And also, on top of that, an interesting statement earlier in the chat was someone was saying, okay, if we were to try to implement some sort of voluntarist society on my Caribbean island, it would turn into complete and total chaos. We need government to maintain stability. So I would love to touch on that very common thread of, that usually comes up when we start getting into anarchy, voluntarism, et cetera. But first and foremost, I would love to hear your take on what you guys are doing in New Hampshire and the solutions that you are engaging with.
So I've got a couple of different solutions that I'm working on. Number one is something called the Thick Red Line Project, where we're educating the police on natural law, and we're suggesting to the police that they, if they don't want to go along with the tyranny of mask mandates and lockdowns and red flag laws and other, government tyranny, that they need to get together and they need to draw a thick red line in the sand, and they need to say, we're not going to use violence on peaceful people for politicians. And so right now, there's man's law or government law, which I like to call politician scribbles, which is crazy illogical. A lot of times it doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive, and it's really, if you go by government law, you get, fugitive slave laws, you get sundowner laws, you get Nazi Germany, right? All of those were tyrannies where they said, oh, it's okay for the police to use violence on peaceful people to impose government policies. And, what you end up getting is you get Nazi Germany. And so we're suggesting that the police draw a thick red line in the sand and say, use natural law as the denominator of morality, which it is. And so in natural law, there's 5 main transgressions. There is murder, rape, theft, assault, and trespass. And all of these are obviously wrong because there is a victim. And they're all thefts. So rape is the theft of sexual choice. Trespass is the theft of security in your lair. Murder is the theft of life. And so that's something that almost all of society can agree on. And if you draw the line at natural law, it's easy. You don't need these, thousands of law books or whatever. Was there a victim or was there not a victim? And if there's not a victim, then the police should stand down and not use violence on peaceful people for politicians. Now, if you're not going to use natural law, then my question to the police and the sheriffs is, well, what is your standard? What is, if you're not going to use natural law with its 1,000-year plus legal tradition across multiple civilizations that anybody can understand, that's easy to get, then what is your standard going to be? And they just look at you like dumbfounded. And so we're at number one, we're educating them on natural law. And also, by the way, when police violate natural law, that makes them the criminals. When you're using violence on peaceful people for politicians, that makes you the bad man. And so a lot of police, they didn't sign up for this. There wasn't red flag laws. There weren't mask mandates. There weren't lockdowns when they signed up for this. And so now they're all going, now I'm the bad man. My community hates me. I'm, I show up places, people laugh at me and, things like that. And so number one, taking a thick red line stand would absolutely restore respect for the police. Because when the police are going after real criminals, rapists and murderers and things like that, well, everybody loves the police. It's only when they violate natural law and use violence on peaceful people for politicians and engage, turn every traffic stop into a commando raid and search everybody's car looking for a drug payday and everything like that. That's why people hate the cops. That's what makes them scumbags in the community. They're robbing their neighbors. They're literally raising revenue on their neighbors for politicians, and everybody hates them. So what we do is the Thick Red Line Project builds support for the police to say no to the politicians by building community support. We're telling you to say no. We're telling you not to enforce these crimes because we want you to be on the right side of history. We want you to be on the right side of karma. And so that's one solution. The other solution is, I believe, to widely expose the illegitimacy and criminality of government in a single U.S. state. And so for your audience that is not familiar with what's going on in New Hampshire, there is something called the Free State Project that got started almost 2 decades ago. And people said, there's a lot of voluntarists and a lot of libertarians and freedom advocates, but we're all scattered all over the United States. Maybe if we just concentrated in a single U.S. state that had a small population under 1.5 million, well, maybe if we concentrated, then we could roll it back, win electorally, and begin, limit government to just protecting life, liberty, and property. And so in 2002, they had a beauty contest where they really said, okay, what, how would we really do it? Which of the states is under 1.5 million? Which one is the easiest to take over? And so they had a kind of bake off, and it came down to between New Hampshire and Wyoming, and New Hampshire won. And so the deal is that participants signed a statement of intent saying that they figured out that it would take about 20,000 dedicated activists to affect change in a state that has a sub 1.5 million population. New Hampshire has 1.3 million, to give you an idea of how many people are in there. And so they said, okay, well, once everybody signs a statement of intent, and once the total membership of the group hits 20,000, everybody moves to that state. Okay. And so once they chose New Hampshire in 2003, boom, people started moving there immediately, even though they didn't have to move until the total membership of the group hit 20,000. And they began getting organized politically, rolling back laws, creating the social and political networks, for political change. They hit 20,000 signers, people that said, "Hey, I'll move," when the group hits 20,000 in 2016. They hit it in 2016, triggering the move. And right now there's over 6,200 members of the Free State Project in New Hampshire that New Hampshire knows about. There's also people there that don't want to be, on a list. And there's another 19,000 that have committed to move, but a lot of them aren't going to move. They signed before they knew it was going to be New Hampshire, or they died, or they got divorced, or they got married, or, whatever it is prohibits them from moving. But that dynamic right now is every single week, more and more people land in the state of New Hampshire, and they are winning on the ground. They've elected 25. They've got 25 members of the, that are elected representatives in New Hampshire. They have another 100 that essentially vote with them on liberty issues, even though they're not members of the Free State Project. But there's a liberty block in New Hampshire. New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax. New Hampshire doesn't have a sales tax, and it does have a business proceed tax. But the Free Staters have gone to the legislature and passed a law that allows you to take some of that business proceed tax and put it to a scholarship fund that can be used to get your kids out of the government school system, and can even be used for homeschooling. And so there is a liberty revolution going on in New Hampshire that is ultimately going to win. And New Hampshire is probably going to be the first state to secede from the United States because of what's going on in the Free State Project. And so in my previous job, I used to be a productivity consultant for Fortune 500, 100 companies. And so I put on my productivity hat, and I'm like, well, how would you accelerate the goals of the Free State Project? And I came up with something called the Pre-State Project. And a pre-stater in New Hampshire is somebody that already lives in New Hampshire but supports the goals of the Free State Project. So they didn't necessarily move there. They already live there, but they're libertarian or voluntarist, and they're 100% on board. And so that's really the fastest way to take over the state, is with the people that are already in the state. And so if we're suffering under a monopolized media, and we're suffering under this control information system, then how do you get around it? And so what my goal is to raise $1 million to drop 100,000 copies of the book, 100,000 of these credit card size flash drives that we call the Liberator. So I'm holding one up for the audience at home, but essentially it's a little credit card that has a USB prong that flips out and allows you to, stick it into, any PC or that has a USB thing. And you've got 32 gigabytes of documentaries, books, memes, truth music, short videos, you name it, exposing the criminality and the illegitimacy of the government. And so, and a documentary, and that amount, $1 million, would also include 36 town hall meetings in 12 different communities in New Hampshire. And so if you want to get around the algorithmic censorship of the media, if you want to get around the monopolization of the media, it's going to have to be essentially a sneaker net, brute force attack, uncensorable. We just go door to door, dropping off a easy to understand picture book, explaining the whole thing with all of the evidence backed up on a drive that cannot be censored on the DARPA internet, algorithmically or otherwise. And so that is the number one way that I think that we could win, is just get around the monopolization and algorithmic censorship. You go door to door, you drop copies of government and the COVID, the biggest scams in history. Now you've got, you target the influential in the state. So you mentioned that I worked at one of the big four think tanks in Washington, D.C. And one of the key things that I learned in that time is that you don't have to win everybody to achieve social change. There's about 10, 15% of society that really, really matters. They are the free thinkers that are listening to this show right now. They are the entrepreneurs. They are the business executives. They are the content creators. They are the professoriate. They are the teachers. They are the people that have the ability to influence others. And so using modern demographics, you can target that group within the state. And then everybody left over, you just go after demographically the parents of high school seniors. So then if you drop 100,000 copies across the state, you're actually hitting 300,000 voters in a single, campaign that would be staggered, because you drive people to in-person meetings where you'd answer all their questions. Hey, my whole block is talking about the fact that we got this book and this flash drive and this documentary and what's going on. And, look, my neighbors are here. And you answer all their questions. You move them to open source, encrypted, uncensorable communications. You get them off of the Facebooks and the Twitters and the controlled platforms to trusted open source, platforms, so you can communicate with them in an ongoing message. But we just widely expose the whole thing in a way that cannot be censored by this organized crime system. And I think if we can free a single state, number one, we need to have a redoubt. So Idaho is already kind of a redoubt, and New Hampshire is already kind of a redoubt, but we need some place where liberty folks can go, where shave-headed order followers have no power. That when the shave-headed order followers come out to try and either raise revenue on their, neighbors, or, enforce on their neighbors, whatever it is, they're just outnumbered and outgunned, and that they're just laughed at because the people understand the unethically manipulative program that the shave-headed order follower has been put through to give him this worldview where he thinks it's okay to use violence on peaceful people, and he's being paid to essentially as to be a gunman for this organized crime system. Well, if enough people in a geography understand that, when the order followers show up, they just get laughed at and like, hey man, they made you shave your head. You're in a costume. Do you not understand how it works? Or take this book. And so we're closest globally in New Hampshire. And so I think New Hampshire is the easiest state for the liberty movement to take over, create a redoubt, and also create a laboratory of liberty where we can begin, templating. How do you roll it back? How do you roll back government on the local and state level to just protecting life, liberty, and property, and then ultimately privatizing the whole thing? Because again, the other big secret of my book is you do not need government. Every single thing the government does that is non-redistributive would be better handled by the free market and mutual aid societies and real charities and nonprofits. And so I think that New Hampshire could be our laboratory of liberty. And the way to win there is to get around this algorithmic censorship of the internet and monopolization of the media, just going door to door in a way that can't be stopped. And so I've got an easy to understand picture book that's already been very, very successful in waking people up all over the world. We've sold, we're selling copies, 20 plus countries. It's already going viral. And so to give you guys an idea of the virality of the book, and I'm going to say 2019, I sold 200 copies, and 2018, I sold 200 copies, and 2018, 200, 2020, 800, last year, 3,850 plus. And out of that 3,850 plus, over 1,000 of those were bought as what we call a friends bundle. So people are buying 5s and 10s and they're giving them away to their friends and their family. They're donating them to libraries. They're putting them in little mini libraries and like communities. They're making them coffee table books on Airbnbs. And so that I've already kind of proven the case that the dynamic works. Now that we've got, now that it's proven and that it's proven viral, now let's, pour gas all over the fire. And in one geographic area, let's widely expose it in a way that can't be covered up by the media. So once New Hampshire secedes, or once New Hampshire begins rolling back government, then there's no way for this. So like New Hampshire seceding, they say government's criminal and that it's illegitimate and they're getting out, and there's some campaign just dropped 100,000 copies of the book. There's no way to censor that. That's called earned media. And that's the most powerful kind of media that, that you can have. And so you could spend $1 million and you could get 50 million in earned media off the whole thing. And so as a productivity focused technologist and productivity expert, that is the easiest and fastest way with no, no violence or, required or anything like that to achieve, widely exposing the illegitimacy and criminality in a single US state.
That's phenomenal and very encouraging too. And we're for sure going to be promoting your book within our community. You mentioned that you're having some success, even getting people in positions of different councils and things. And I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that. And I see, okay, there might be some value with getting, real truthful voices in positions like that, but it still isn't even what we think of as our government. And the only way around it, I think, is just to start forming, get a building and form your own town council. And because those are all incorporated, they have nothing to do with us. They're all privately owned. So would you see any value with, just trying to get seats within the established corporate power? Because it's not designed for us. It's really none of our business, actually.
So I want to be clear that not everybody in New Hampshire is a voluntaryist. There are lots of minarchists and constitutional Republicans and things like that, and so they believe in in the system. I don't believe in voting unless it's defensively, but there are people in New Hampshire that are elected officials that do not vote to rob their neighbor. They only vote to roll back laws. They only vote to reduce taxes. They only vote in that dynamic. That's something that I could support and get behind. If you're saying, hey, government is illegitimate, we need to be rolling it back, the government doesn't need to be doing this, that's something that you can get behind. The denominator of morality for a politician is the second that they think they know better what to do with your money than you do, and that they vote to rob you to put some, pet program into place. Now you're voting to rob your neighbor and redistribute it through this illegitimate, crooked, government system. And so the biggest concentration of libertarian and minarchist and constitutional Republican, legislators in the country is in New Hampshire. And they're already winning in the sense that there's no income tax, there's no sales tax, it's one of the lowest tax burdens in the country. And guess what? They've also got the least poverty in the United States, the least amount of children living in poverty. They've got so freedom works. It delivers the goods. New Hampshire is an example of what happens when you get rid of the illegitimate organized crime middleman. Then the economy can flourish, and that you can have massive economic growth. And so the way that we're going to, rebuild wealth in this country is we've got to get rid of this organized crime middleman, and then the economy can flourish. And then, if we just fix the monetary system, forget the overt taxes and the covert taxes, things like that. If we just fix the monetary system, that alone would cause a tremendous amount of wealth and a tremendous amount of, your dollar should be buying more and more every single year. Absent a crooked monetary system, that the monetary unit of wherever you are should buy more and more as innovations and productivity improvements reduce the costs of manufacturing and distributing the luxuries and necessities of life. An example I gave the other day is, there are constantly, new innovations that are taking the cost out of everything. I was looking at a news article, a couple months ago about this giant sale that they can put on ocean-going freighters. Okay, so it can be modified to any boat, any freighter, any oil tanker, anything like that. It's just a giant sail that is computer controlled to like catch the amount of wind. And I think that it reduces like the cost of an ocean passage by, it was either 20 or 40%. I don't remember. I gotta look back and figure out what the same is, but like that 20 or 40%, cost reduction would be passed on to the customers in a competitive marketplace between people that are like, oh, I just cut 40% off of my cost of shipping. I'm going to try and win more market share by passing that along to my customers. And so it's those kind of market innovations that should be driving costs lower. Why are costs going up? Because they're stealing the value out of everybody's money. Imagine how wealthy everybody listening to this would have been if they had, if their dollar was buying more and more and more every single year for the past 20, 30, 40, 50, 70 plus years of their life. We would have more than enough surplus to help the poor, the needy, the disadvantaged. People just don't really understand economics because it is being hidden from them by the mandatory government schools and their rip-off universities. It's literally being the market principles that, liberty works. If people understood that you could get everything you want from the government without the theft and extortion and craziness and warfare and everything else that government produces, we'd have gotten rid of government long ago. People just don't understand because it's being hidden from them.
Yeah, we know that technology is inherently deflationary. And so as things get more and more efficient, costs going down, and yet there seems to be this constant race between inflating the dollar and competing with the deflationary technology that surrounds us. I do have a question though, Etienne. A couple. Seems like the strategy in New Hampshire, right, is sort of a bridge into voluntarism. So dealing with the crisis, if you will, that is around us. This is one strategy to kind of get us more towards independent self-governance, right? But my question is too, and I was just hanging out with David Avocado Wolf last weekend, and he's talking about the impending civil war that's coming. Mm-hmm. I mean, would this be the start of that if New Hampshire was to try to succeed? And we know if we look back in history, things don't always turn out well when you go against BlackRock and Vanguard, mm-hmm. if you will, the Council of Nine, or whatever you want to call them. Do you foresee that turning into some sort of conflict like we're seeing in Ukraine right now?
So I think that they would actually leave it alone, because I think that if they tried to do something either militarily or federal, law enforcement related in the state to try and bring it back into line, that would just make what was going on, that would just popularize what's going on, i.e. that we're seceding because government is illegitimate and it's criminal. And here's all of our evidence that it's illegitimate, and here's all of our evidence that it's criminal. And so, we've got criminality, and the media is in on it. And so if the state was seceding for those reasons, I don't think that they would want to bring, focus and attention to why New Hampshire is leaving. And so I think that they would actually, leave it alone. If they did try and do that, well, then the fastest way to expose tyranny is to make the government act like a tyrant. And so then, you've got, if let's say you had, a federal law enforcement heading to the state, or you had whatever, the citizens of the state are saying like, hey, what you guys are doing is wrong. You're using violence on peaceful people. We're peaceful people. We don't want any more part of the system, and you're trying to force us into it. It's organized crime. And so like, it's just, it's a dynamic that's never been tried. And I think that if you were to try it, it's a public relations nightmare. There's no way for them to win. There's no way.
Well, the only thing I would say is they are masters of propaganda using the media, the corporate media, and they know, look what they've done to the jabber or these, and so I could see them crafting this really well thought out narrative before they come in, showing that people in New Hampshire are crazy. They're, they're endangering grandma, whatever their thing is. So I think personally, we need a groundswell of awareness across the entire plane of existence. But and I'm a big fan of counties where you have sheriffs backing you up, right?
Yep.
But you are right. We need that groundswell of truth through your book and through decentralized, uncensorable media, like what we do here. And I've been working on a program, a platform. Well, not me, but thousands of people, called Chordal, which is the new internet, which is a peer-to-peer, encrypted, decentralized, open source, from the ground up, hardware derived from the ground up system. But I would say we need a groundswell of a great majority of people understanding this before any kind of state can try to succeed, just knowing what they're so masterfully good at with media. I mean, they'll put Disney and they'll make movies about New Hampshire showing how crazy people are there,
But Mike, here's the deal. So to be able to have that groundswell, you have to widely expose what's going on. So people like, the people that are wearing the mask, the people that are getting the jabs, they're having the information controlled to them algorithmically or through the monopolization of the media. And so to be able to widely expose what's going on, you've got to be able to get around that. And the only way that I can think of, if somebody else has got a better idea, then please, Etienne at artofliberty.org, email it to me. But the only cost-effective, guaranteed way to get around that is just to go door to door and to drop something off that is compelling, that has all the evidence, that's backed up by all of the evidence of government criminality in a variety of different formats for different learning preferences. Some people like documentaries, some people like reading books on PDF on their tablets, some people like short videos, whatever it is. We can win everywhere. I agree with you. We can win everywhere, but first we have to win somewhere. And the easiest place on the planet to win is New Hampshire. Okay. Do you want to win in California? Let's win in New Hampshire first. Do you want to win in Israel? Let's win in New Hampshire first. Do you want to win in the UK? Let's win New Hampshire first. Let's win one. Let's widely expose it. Let's get widely expose how the magician does the trick in a way that most people can understand because they're visual learners and they can see it with their own eyes. Okay. And once you do that, they're not, it's a revolution that only goes in one direction. What I've discovered is once people realize either, number one, they really get it in their mind. They really get it in their mind that government it's been a scam the entire friggin' time. There is no way to have a legitimate government. There is no way to have a moral government. You can't do it through coronation. You can't do it through an election. You can't do it through constitutional republicanism. You can't do it through communism. You can't do it at all. You cannot have a moral, legitimate government. That's number one. And number two, once people realize that there's a man behind the curtain in the media, and the media is, on the whole media is being played by what the CIA calls the mighty Wurlitzer, the ability to play the media and non-government organizations and front groups and things like that, all getting them singing one tune, like a Wurlitzer is a giant organ where it's got a gazillion different pipes that all can be, stoked to play the exact same tune. Once they realize that that the media and the government are in on it together and that they're lying, etc., I just don't know anybody that goes back to believing in government. I've heard of one person I've never met them in the wild. There's a story about a woman that was a Free State Project person that came to New Hampshire and then just went back to being a liberal. That's the only story that I've ever heard of somebody that once they get it, goes back to either shaving their head or wearing a costume or, being a chump, because nobody likes to get chumped, right? So like once you realize, oh, they're running game on me with the media and they're weaving the flag into, product placing the flag into all the television shows and making the government the hero in all the television shows and the movies, whether it's, Tom Cruise, the CIA agent, or the president of the United States flying fighter jets to protect the world from invading aliens. Once they get it, oh my God, it's been propaganda and nobody's gonna get fooled again. And so that revolution is only going in one direction. So how do we kick it off in one single state? You just got to go door to door. There's no other way to do it, and it's cheap. So for $1 million, you could hit 100,000 homes with a documentary, a credit card flash drive, and a hard copy book that's impossible to put down once you pick it up. And you could have 36 town hall meetings in a dozen different, cities and states. And that you're hitting, there's only about 800 something thousand voters. So you're hitting 300,000 voters, okay, in a single essential drop for $1 million. And so that to me, that's the only way that I can see to do. I've got one other way, but that's a story for another time.
I've got a couple other ideas too. We can chat about after.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. It is. I give it up.
I think it's fairly intuitive, the way you're going about it. And while we've been talking here, I just bought a couple of your Liberator cards. And, I'm just putting in my credit card right now. It's not that you even have to come up with somebody with $1 million. If each of us just buy a couple of these things, and I'm in the shopping cart right now at government-scam.com. And I guess I got to that on the artofliberty.org. Am I correct?
It's artofliberty.org or government-scam.com.
Okay, the shopping cart took me to government-scam.com. So great. I'm looking forward to getting my cards here. So any other thing you can tell our audience as far as how they can support you with this? Because I really want to get on board because I think you're doing amazing things.
Well, the one thing I wanted to point out is because Mike had mentioned it earlier, is that, that need to have, your own kind of community center or something, that's separate from the government. That's going on in New Hampshire. And it's one of the only places in the country. There's a couple of others, dedicated liberty centers. But right now there are 4 dedicated liberty centers that I know of that are being used as kind of homeschooling co-ops and community centers. In Manchester, New Hampshire, there's one called the Quill. Okay, that is a private social club that has got hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000 out of the 6,200 Free State Project members that live in New Hampshire, all over New Hampshire. Over 1,000 of them, probably 1,500 or more, live in New Hampshire, and they've got a magnificent community center called the Quill that has got a center for liberty in that city. There's one called the Praxium outside of Dover. There's one called the Shell, kind of outside of Portsmouth, and there's one in Ware, Weahre, called the Warehouse. And these are being used at, so now you've got a dedicated space for activists. You've got a homeschooling co-op, so people can get their kids out of the, government indoctrination centers and be able to, team teach and cooperatively teach, where one parent is teaching biology and another parent is teaching math and things like that. And so that dynamic is already going on. There's 4 different liberty centers in New Hampshire right now. And so that's something to know about. Just to finish up, the best ways to, to find find out about us are, artofliberty.org and government-scam.com. I'm in the process of finishing up the 5th edition of the book. I hope to have that out by the end of the month. I hope to send it to the printer by the end of the month. It's been a Herculean effort of really trying to understand, how the scam of the cooties was done, to be able to make it simple so that people can understand it and to make it visual. And so I think I'm going to have the first visually compelling overview of how the scam of the COVID was put together, who the suspects are, how they did it, where the money went. And so that's what I'm looking on. I finally see the finish line and coming up, but that's a little bit about us. And the final thing is we have a newsletter called 5 Meme Friday, where we break down the best of the alternative media. And also we're all about the meme. So we've got the freshest, dankest memes in Liberty. And we send out
meme magic, baby. Meme magic. Look what the Kekistan did for that whole movement. Yeah, memes are powerful.
The pentagram is scared of mimetic warfare, and there's a reason, because a meme can just cut through the BS in a way that that nothing else can. The example I get, the only meme that I've got twice in the book is it's the signing of the Constitution. And, somebody's going, sign right here, where we give ourselves the ability to make up rules for everyone and take the wealth of others. And like that one meme just exposes the whole, fraudulent, ridiculous, illogical nature of the Constitution in a way that took Lysander Spooner, he had to write a book called The Constitution of No Authority to, you can just cut through it with just a meme, just like slices like a hot knife through butter. And so 5 Meme Friday, we're pumping them out. We've got the funniest memes in Liberty.
I'm on there right now, and I'm looking at one. Looks like a scene in the DMV, and it says licensing when the government takes away your right to do something and then sells it back to you. Boy, isn't that the truth? Yeah, these are great. Okay, well, I'll be a frequent visitor to this.
We'll be sharing some of these memes on our Telegram for sure. And yeah, I think that's, the visualization that you're implementing, that you're using is powerful stuff, because we are visual. There's many people out there are visual learners, for one, but two, it just cuts through all the BS, through all the mentalism, and gets right to the heart. Right to the central truth. And, if I can clarify here, when you're saying government, all government is evil, well, we have to govern ourselves. There is some sort of, we're saying the mind control is evil, the centralized top down, since, I think we've always had some sort of government. Has civilized mankind ever existed together without government, ever? Has that experiment ever actually happened? I don't know. I was looking back. There's been some little pockets of anarchy and stuff, but I would love to just finish on this, if we can, get a little philosophical and where we go and how we self-govern. I know this is probably a whole other podcast. It really is. And I'd love to touch on this because I love geeking out on this stuff. You have Plato who touched on this, with the idea of Plato's Republic and having the philosopher king and this need for us to be in a moral state, right? A divine moral state of brotherly and sisterly love with each other. How do we do that? Like, how has that ever actually successfully been done ever?
The short answer is yes, and that's going to be the subject of my next book, which will be called Volunteerism, how the only ism, fair for everyone, leads to harmony and prosperity for all. And so if you think of all the other isms, every other ism, whether it's communism or, constitutional republicanism, whatever it is, there is a ruling class that gets to use violence and extortion on everybody else. And so the only ism that's fair for everybody is voluntarism. Nobody gets the ring of power. Nobody gets to use violence or extortion on anybody else. And without giving away the ending, the good news is the world is a self-organizing place. It produces something called spontaneous order. And that, once you realize that the government is just a provider of monopoly services, okay, you have to use our courts, you have to use our whatever, and you're like, oh, that could all be done in a free market where the free market would do it better, faster, cheaper, without the violence or extortion. You're free. You're free. You now have got, you now realize, oh, I don't have to vote to rob my neighbor. And when I vote to rob my neighbor, it's kind of, douchey. So, I think that's a subject for another podcast.
Yeah.
But that's my short answer is my next book called Volunteerism.
It's an individual by individual inside job, and immorality will never be breached unless people are given the freedom. And that is what I see government most often is it licenses immorality and does not encourage it in the individual. And we look outside of ourselves. So a lot of us are starting to look within and develop or rediscover those attributes in and of ourselves. So I would answer that question too. Yeah. Self-governance starts with each one of us individually. Etienne, this has been a brilliant conversation. You're doing amazing things. Thank you so much. And love to have you back on maybe after your 5th edition is out and you can take us into the next level of what we just left off with.
Yeah, Art of Liberty.
Absolutely. It's been a delightful conversation, and I want to thank you guys for doing what you do, because we're all going to win this thing together. We're all like, it's a flowers blooming, and so thank you.
I was just going to say artofliberty.org. Check that out, and government-scam.com, which is a great website where you can get the book. And I mean, you get mad props from Mark Passio, Larkin Rose, James Corbett, and our boy, David Rodriguez, who I've spoken with a bunch and really need to get him on this show with what he's doing with unschooling and everything. But I mean, you're just affecting so many lives right now. And we appreciate you so much, Etienne. And great strategy. And we want to support in every way we can. So if you guys are listening and resonating with this, please go to the site, purchase some books, pay it forward. That is really what the economy, which we didn't really totally touch on. I believe the sacred economy of giving, the gifting economy, is so crucial moving forward in a true free market. So gift these books forward to those you think will resonate, or not even the sleeping family members is really what this is for, right? So this is the bridge. This is the bridge for the awakening. So thanks so much, Etienne. This has been a wonderful show. And thank you guys. Please give us a thumbs up, share with your friends and family if you enjoyed this content. That really helps us out. And we love you. Remember to get outside, get your feet in the soil, plant something, go for a hike. Mother Nature is our best teacher. And we will see you next week. Cheers, guys.